Retail for brand founders, you have to want to learn. The curiosity matched with the actual percentage that you can actually spend on testing this, 10% tested, you are going to grow. And I guarantee you that, because the more you learn, the more you have an ear on what you're actually creating, what people are picking up on, the more it sort of pauses you. And then you create that next product, and it's probably going to be more fine tuned.
So if you're a brand that's still scratching their head around how do you expand into retail, this episode's for you. Today we have Joy Fan, who I like to refer to as the retail queen. She seems to know everything and anything about how do you expand into retail. She started multiple businesses that are designed to do exactly that, to help scaling brands go into retail. And in this episode, we talk about how and when does a brand know it's the right time to add retail or add in-person selling into their business model. So if you're interested in that, stick around. Joy, Zoe was just saying like, oh my God, she's a baller. And I'm
What? Oh, you guys. No, I'm so excited to meet you too. I mean, like, first, I can't wait for the exchange. CJ, obviously you're working with CJ, so there's, already magic happening. So thank you guys for inviting me on this. I don't know if CJ gave you the preface of our connection. I was like, the Peak team has been speaking wonders. So it's like automatically, I was like, great, I got to speak to this guy. So yeah, but tell me about you. So how did you guys was this kind of like the brainchild of both of you guys? Like what was sort of the the
podcast. Zoe, I mean, you want to go
yeah,
ahead?
the
You can
podcast.
give your side.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it started with just like, first of all, we obviously just love chatting, connecting with people, and we always have so many questions in terms of like we want to learn, we want to grow. We know a lot of people in the space, and personally for me, from my perspective, I'm like, this is such a great learning and growing opportunity in terms of I get to speak with industry leaders, brands, and just learn about how to scale businesses. So it came about that bad idea for clarity. It's something we use internally a lot in our agency when we're sort of briefing creative teams and speaking with them. It's almost like something you have to beat in terms of like bad idea for clarity. And we give them an idea and they come and they have to try and beat that idea. And when we're creating ads, and I think it just felt like it was so fitting for the title of the podcast. And it definitely all came from CJ, and I'm here to learn and grow and help co-host.
Too kind.
Yeah.
Joy, I think we joked around when we were thinking about starting the podcast, like, I've logged some years under my belt. Zoe's earlier in her career, right? So there's this, sometimes I'm too close to the forest to see the trees and ask, the questions that maybe a lot of people are thinking. And like Zoe, just by the number of years, might be asking much better questions than I'll ask. So this kind of co-host model, I think, is a lot of fun. So that's
great.
kind of our
Yes,
aim
it's like
for it.
sometimes when we start to say acronyms, it's like, great, we got to break that down. But it's kind of the same way where I'm learning how, the young are sort of using new words.
The youths.
And we're all sort of, everyone's learning. Everyone's learning on all sides.
Yeah. And I think in this sport that we call marketing, it's kind of like it is a young person sport too, and it's like and it's always growing and evolving every day. Especially with like AI and all that. And I think if you have ego and you think you know it all, you'll just be extinct before you know it. So like you have to have no ego. You have to be able to ask the stupid question. Yeah. So Joy, like I said, I've already kind of hyped you, but I don't even think that I have the full story. We were just, the endless scroll on your LinkedIn profile as we're like prepping for this call.
Oh my, it's also it's the year.
I was just saying to CJ before the call, I was like, geez, you've done experiential marketing, strategy, brand partnerships, retail, over 17 years experience, and you founded 2 companies. And I'm like, I need to hear about your journey and your background.
Yes.
Can we put you on the spot to give your like life story?
Yes. I think thematically you'll see that, and why I think you'll see characteristically of me. I tend to work with brands who are solving either their own or a very, very big problem in which they just feel very loyal to. It's the same as myself. I think, in your young 20s, you go into this beastly, I can do anything, I can do everything. And I saw a lot of what was restricting to me was a lot of what was happening in the real estate world. Pre 20, again, 12, 2010, will even date back to 2008. Nothing like pop-ups was even a word. I mean, it was actually a bad word. People were very resistant to the idea of retail getting broken up. So everything was 10, 20 years pre 2010. And that was something, again, as young 20s, I was doing physical, or I was building out brands and wanting it to test in physical space. It was a no-brainer. And that dynamic of them saying, great, look, let me call up this vacant space. And of course, but at that time, you had to walk space to space. You saw the big, and that's still what's happening now. And I'll share with you why we created Storefront. But you have to walk space to space. You get on a phone call. There's, someone who's like very, very intense, a little bit rude on the other side. And they're like, wait, who are you? How much credit do you have? What's your deal? How much money do you have in your bank account? And you're like, wait, what? I want to create a brand. Two, I want to put it there. And then I started to aggregate a bunch of friends who were also brand founders. Um, and we all came together. This was all of our side hustles, by the way. We all had corporate jobs, and then our side hustles were building brands. And in the physical retail world, it was such a black box. You weren't able to get into physical retail space without, again, signing your arm and a leg. And so that was just a big, huge problem. And so we started to do and aggregate these, what would back then be considered, sample sales. It could be considered trunk shows, and pop-ups. And so I just brought together friends, and we would just do them in cafes, coffee shops, or cafe coffee shops. We would do them in random art galleries. And that was just the beginning of it. And I was doing it all over San Francisco, all over New York City. Meanwhile, just saying, cool, this is like something that hopefully eventually my brand is going to keep growing. And so I was growing it via physical space. Went back to San Francisco, met these guys who had just finished this accelerator, and they're really interested in the real estate space. And they wanted to know someone who had actually physically gotten pop-ups. So I was like, cool, this is what happens. This is what the needs are. This is why it's broken. This is sort of the 10, 20-year lease problem. And this is, again, why I'm speaking to that era of 2008, 2010, because you can imagine there was just, real estate. There was a big issue on in many ways. So you can see that there was a bit of a flat line, and vacancy rates were just rising. And so I think at that point, it was like something like it doubled from 4 to 8% at that time. Um, that doesn't speak to then what ended up happening again in 2020. So I'll kind of give you guys sort of these eras that I was in. In 2010, I was like, great, met these guys. They were very, very excited about building something in real estate. I was like, here's a problem. Here's a bunch of brands. And I was just naming hundreds of us who were like, great, we're just all new brand founders. We want space, and this isn't going to work. And so we essentially educated a ton of landlords, REITs, brokers, especially, on what was the demand. And I think that was the first part of it. It wasn't necessarily even building, the infrastructure. It was educating the entire space that the demand was there. And so this is also the rise of e-commerce brands. So Shopify was doing its magic, Etsy was doing its magic. Everyone was starting to say, great, it's easier than ever to build a brand. So that was happening. And in parallel, I was saying, well, we got to break open what's happening in real estate, because if you still have 10, 20-year leases, we're looking for a short term. We want a testing ground, same as what was happening in e-commerce. And so that allowed for then in 2012, we built something called Storefront, which is an aggregation, sort of like an MLS for vacant space. And so it became global in 2016. We had an acquisition from a Paris company, and it was an awesome thing, because then I think the most if I date back, I think the most awesome thing was hearing the chatter of pop-ups, and hearing the word become something that was restricted, then become the thing that was like the leverage. And I think more and more and more, I always think it's exciting to see that the problem that you have, it might be something small, it might be your own, but if you keep at it and you aggregate the demand, it just creates and it breaks open the entire thing. And so there's much, much, much work to be done. I believe it sort of then enters into my next phase. So in between Storefront and then the next phase of it, I had worked with REITs, and the important thing was that there was this whole narrative about how shopping malls are dead and retail is dead, and that was kind of like between 2012 and 2018, all of those headlines. But at the same time, WeWork was rising. And so people had this interest of, well, there's this whole experiential space. And so I worked with a ton of landlords and REITs, just sharing with them how to redo and really just rebrand the space. I think that it's required for everyone to look at it as like, great, we're still humans walking around. I think we're still going to go from point A to B. I think we're going to always be surrounded by technology in some way. But what's that in between? We're still, we still have eyes, we still have ears, we still have sensory. So I just think that it's being able to again attract those moments in between. We're not on your phone. And so that's basically what I shared with REITs and created something called Retail as a Service. Worked with amazing platforms and brands like Beta, and built out something called Bespoke for Westfield. Did another one for uh, for a couple of different REITs, and so it's been a fun journey. And then I'll kind of end cap it with in 2020. We all know what happened, and the volatility of what happens when you have retail and the government gets involved with the opens and closures and occupancy rates. It's funny then to understand that if you haven't built a business, small business on the ground physically, and understanding what it takes to actually not only build a schedule and have people show up and create incentive structure and culture around that, it was wild to really, really dive in and really understand from the small business standpoint. And I'm saying these are like $100,000 to $1 million, in business. So these are our coffee shops and retail stores. And a lot of them were just, I was just walking around. There was nothing to do. We all remember. It was like the
Yeah.
world shut down. And I was like, how many of us are impacted? And it just felt like that moment, that moment that brought me back to that 2008 moment where you're like, oof, that gut wrench. You're like, there's things that are hopeful. And then everything was shutting down. You had um, every retail store boarded up. And so yeah, the text message started coming in. And, I feel like what was happening was a lot of the brands that I worked with that I built out, either the physical retail store or their first pop up, they're trying to figure out how they're going to actually move inventory. And so we were just playing a game of, well, it felt like I was then a matchmaker. And I was like, well, why don't you just show up at, XYZ's, coffee shop and like see if they can move some product. And that was essentially what happened is we started to um, just merge these like brands and say, great, maybe you can do it here. And then we built a platform around it and started saying, great, it's there, these are things that we're kind of doing again and again. How can we actually scale the back end? And so that's when retail was born. It was really as a very intimate, like, wow, this feels almost too similar. We got to keep pushing this. And even more so, I think when we created pop-ups as a short term agreement and a license agreement, it was amazing, I think, for brands, but also the pricing, the ticket was still very, very high. And so the problem that I always heard was that brands were saying, well, I can't, like, how do I know? How do I commit? And I think that that's the biggest thing that everyone wants to understand is like, how do I commit? It's like, buying a massive ring on the first date,
Mhm.
essentially, when you are like, great, is the demographic there? Are there going to be traffic? And so we built retail because it was really based off of test and learn. If you are placing your product on a shelf in a cafe, people are walking by it, they pick it up, they smell it, they want to learn about it. Great, let's start there. And it's about being able to have the product speak for itself and a conversation surrounding it. So that's what retail was based off of, is really, really narrowing that price point and getting it completely down to something that would be as simple as you maybe built the product and you want to test it for the first time. You should be able to do that. right
Yeah.
on the platform.
So do I have
That's
this right? So
that's how we kind of,
Storefront
yeah.
is kind of like the big brother or the predecessor, and where you're matchmaking, retailers or up and coming businesses with full spaces for a retail
Yes.
location and or a pop up, and then it's like retail, and for those listening, retail.co, right? Is that right, Joy?
Yes, that's correct.
Um,
Yep.
and it's like that's almost like the mini version where you're connecting them with just like open shelf space in
Yes.
different
Open
locations. Is
shelf
that
space, open, yep, yep. And then, we took a turn of being able to do now more focus on activations and more day. So again, anyone who's listening who's excited to learn more, absolutely reach out. But yeah, to simplify it, Storefront, it's an open, again, more of an MLS. So if anyone's from New York, they know it's street easy pretty well. You can look it up and say, great, I want to be able to be in Soho area. What are the different pop-ups that are available?
yeah, kind of look like
What
like
retail
a
does.
peer space for retail too.
Yes,
Like even though you
exactly,
guys
exactly.
probably were before them.
I love.
I think it was around something about that.
I was
Yes,
gonna say I love the day analogies you're using of almost like matchmaking online brands with physical spaces, and it's like
because it physically felt like that. It
Hey Joy,
definitely physically felt like that,
I
for
want to go back
sure.
to
Go
something that
ahead.
you said, like kind of part of the genesis story of like, pop-ups were kind of demonized or like a bad word. Why do you, and I don't understand the pop-up game at all. Like why do people hate on them? Like what are the reasons, valid or not? Like what are the misconceptions? And then why are they a good idea for some brands?
Yeah, I would say so. So it was a bad word, not for consumers, but it was a bad word for the industry. So what what um how it was demonized was that landlords, they're looking at the depreciation of and the value of their space. And so if you have multiple people painting again and again, you're just seeing the depreciation go down. The thing is that, real estate was built upon this idea that people wanted something for longer than 20, 30 years. And we're just not built that way anymore. The consumer market really leads what brands get to do. And I think that even 5 years is kind of like you might enter into one market, you might be in, downtown Soho area to start, and then you move and shift up to maybe Flatiron because you find that families are maybe, or Tribeca. So I think that it was a fixed lease because that's what has been before. And the demand is what truly shifted and changed the dynamic entirely. I think the consumers actually were the ones who pushed for what needed to happen for the retail market. And I believe it needs to be pushed further. I think that there's still the stopgap between what's happening in real estate and there's a lot of again there isn't a lot of transparency whatsoever when it comes to real estate pricing, specifically commercial. And I think it's really important for people to see that this mid-market selection process that happens is sort of it's arbitrary. It's kind of like why DTC grew so fast is that we wanted to be able to pull and purchase products without someone selecting for us. And so I do think that that's something that we kind of, if we break it out fully, real estate may be more elective based on again the neighborhood. And I fully see that happening, in the next 5, 10 years, where again the data gets better, where we're using actually digital marketing
Mhm.
data and actually pulling into physical retail. Right now, it's so siloed that I think that's why it's a little bit of this black box. No one's really speaking about it, but whenever I see vacancies, I think that that's like why do we all pay the highest prices? Why do we pay the highest taxes? And then we see that we have to walk an extra or we have to pay a premium for our online deliveries. So these are all things that I think that, I like to sort of wake up in conversation because it allows for us as consumers to ask the right questions and see that it's all impacting us on the day to day. Our pricing, inflation for, what we get to in terms of convenience, it's the cost of living. So if we can't get it downstairs, like literally downstairs, what are we all doing? And so really the demand comes from understanding and really breaking open why real estate is such a black box. But back to your question on pop-ups, I actually quite find, and it's also dependent on demographic, on city, but
Yeah,
you know,
Joy,
pop-ups.
can we even back
Oh,
up?
go
I
ahead.
realized when I asked the
Yeah.
question, I'm like, I actually don't know the definition of a pop-up. Like, what's the difference
Yeah.
between a pop-up? How, like, is there is it defined by time frame or what? Like, what is a
Yes.
pop-up?
Yes. I think there's a podcast that I did like 10 years ago that said defined it as anything that is under a year. So, and now maybe it's defined as a license agreement. Uh, Now day pop-ups are considered activations. So there's new terms for everything. But I would say pop-up is anything under a year. And you can do it from a day to a year. Anything over that, you're signing likely a longer term lease. And that's just something that landlords end up trying to get you to do. So yeah, I mean, I've seen people extend pop-ups indefinitely and do it continuously over and over again. So you can absolutely do that too.
Got it.
You talked about these sort of like eras that you've been through, of almost like pre-COVID, COVID, and then it's like post-COVID era, which we're in right now. So the thing I'm just really interested to hear from you is that during COVID,
Sorry, one moment, you guys. So sorry.
No, no problem.
Sorry, you guys. I have to move. This is gonna totally ruin everything? I have to move, but I can hold I can hold my 1 second. So
Yeah,
sorry, you guys.
just don't shut your laptop, Joy, if you can. I don't know what are you gonna ask? No, don't say it.
can just clip this section out. Right.
Oh yeah, it's like it'll take 2 seconds to clip out. Basically the same background.
Did you just do a lap around the office and come back to the same spot?
Totally. No, you guys know the little call boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing an event or something for New York Tech Week. So yeah.
The
I
guys
got through
at
it.
the guys at Peak Design call them fart pods.
Oh boy, then I'm definitely not entering any one of those. That's so funny. If you see that the next time you visit the office and there's candles there, that will be me. That's just kind of like
Yeah.
putting candles around.
Or like the Febreze.
Oh yeah, totally. Just carrying that around. But sorry to break the momentum, you guys. Hope that didn't mess everything up.
Not at all.
But
Not
yeah.
at all.
Okay,
I think
cool.
I was just asking a question around like COVID. Like, obviously, that threw a huge spanner in the works for retail, physical spaces, brick and mortar stores. Like, that was a period where a lot of brands were just shutting down because they just could not maintain revenue during that time. And I feel like there's this huge societal shift in the perspectives of like, do we actually need physical spaces? And I think a lot of brands, if they're deciding to make that move from like online into physical, how a lot of these questions of like, can it be done online? And I feel like I would love just to hear your thoughts around that.
Yes. Well, I will say that naturally I'm going to be biased that eventually everything that if you hit sort of a plateau, so to speak, or it's almost like being behind the walls. And I believe, if you have a physical product, it's just so entirely important to have physical space be met. I love the dating analogy because it's like being able to just date online and you can do that continuously and continuously. But when you, for the first time, go on a date physically, it's like, whoa, it just, the demeanor, you shift entirely. And I think that there's a lot to say about the vulnerability that happens, but it also breaks open the opportunity that is it's limitless. The idea that a human can fall in love with your product and really love it, and there's no cap to it. What they can purchase and how much, and how their minds can be changed. And I think that's the beauty of marketing in general. I think that I always love when marketing added with physical space or physical touch points. It's you can change
Mhm.
someone's mind entirely, and that's my like the most exciting thing for me and why retail matters. And so I think the biggest, the biggest thing is that everyone always asks, like, but when or is it going to be successful? I think you can even count all the brands who did it very, very well strategically. And I will speak to some that you guys probably see all over now. Ferrari being one of them, Faraday being another, who just like when all was quiet and everything shut down, their team they knew it. They knew that being able to again sign these leases and really pick them up all while everyone was quiet. It was, I think, Faraday opened like 30 stores in a year. And that kind of momentum grew them into, this massive, well-known brand that they are. How to maintain that, that's another, segment and that I'm sure we're going to speak to. But I think the exciting thing is that that your brand is sort of spilling over the conversations via, your socials and people just wanting to meet. And I think more than ever, people want that. It's like the brand having their house be completely opened for people to come in. And I always call it like the hang. If you are a brand who knows that you really, really like the intimacy of getting to hear feedback or understanding and you're curious about what that feedback leads to, then definitely do physical retail because physical retail is that it's essentially opening up all the windows and all the doors and saying, great, come on in and we're open to the feedback and we want to grow with you. And when you are very centered at who your customer is, it's like surfing that wave and surfing the wave of retail is the most excellent state to be in. But
Oh,
yes, I'm happy to answer the when question that
yes,
everyone
you're
always
yes.
tends to ask.
Like how because we work with a lot of brands that are digital only, still scaling
Yes.
up, and it's like I think every brand that we work with would agree. Like if I had a magic wand, I would love to open my own shop for all the reasons you listed, to get hands-on products, to get the feedback from customers, to identify where our blind spots are in our messaging. It's like, oh, we think this is a big deal, but actually nobody cares about this when they walk into the store. All those things. When what is your like do you have a
Yes. Okay.
framework,
So I'll break it
criteria?
down for us. Yes. So the thing is, I believe that in the moment you start a brand, if let's say we can break it down to revenue. I think that makes the most sense for people to hear it and hear it for themselves and say, okay, um w- w- what bracket am I? Maybe if that's a great way to say it. So let's say you're making about $1,000 a month, so you're about like 12K in annual revenue. At that point, you should, and I'm not saying that to open up a physical retail space on your own. I'm saying, great, at any point in which you're doing $1,000 in sales, you're at a good point to say, ooh, maybe I want to do a booth at a market, or I want to do some sort of collective pop up, or I want to, and that's saying great. And I'm going to say that only spend 10%, don't spend more, spend up to 10% of those dollars. And you're probably spending in total maybe 20 to 30% on marketing. You should be, I hopefully. And you guys can break that down. But I would say 10% of it, try it in physical because it will change the trajectory of of your creation of your product, everything. But like I would say it's not if I had a wand, I would say everyone should do it. But if you were to say, but if you gave me a wand, I would say everyone should do therapy as well. So when it comes to this retail for brand founders, you have to want to learn. The curiosity matched with the actual percentage that you can actually spend on testing this. You get 10% tested, you are going to grow 300%. And I guarantee you that because the more you learn, the more you have an ear on what you're actually creating, what people are picking up on, the more it sort of pauses you and then you create that next product and it's probably going to be more fine-tuned. So it's kind of like stopping and then learning and then being like, great, let me pull back and let me iterate on whether it's like new colors, you name it. I would say then the next bracket would be
But
you know,
even just
let's
to
say I
pause
husband
there,
now.
and just to build on it too, from my own experience as like a startup founder in a past life, I mean, we would go to, trade shows, things
Yes.
like that, and I think it should be required of marketing teams, people on marketing teams, go man a booth at a trade show
Yes.
and talk to
Yes.
them, because we had so many messages that nobody cared about. So I was in the better for you pain relief space. We had a pain relief cream made from natural ingredients, and we thought we were like, and the ingredients were important and what it's made out of and the non-toxin and all that. But it was, if that was here, that message was here. The does it work was off the charts. Nobody, if it worked, nobody cared what was in it. And it was just like,
Yes.
oh, we need to maybe change our messaging hierarchy a little bit. And it
Yes.
was just like
Yes.
clear as day, slapped in the face. And
Yes.
I think marketers tend to, work in their silos and drink their own Kool-Aid and go be a salesperson for a day.
Yes. And it's all, I think that's why it's like having the ear to what your product means to you. I think when it's a very vulnerable space to be in, to actually be there and get feedback, and I think that that's an important state to be able to say, great, am I building a product for just me, or am I building it for something, someone, a concern, or something better? And I think when you get to that state where you're like, actually, I am solving something, your feedback loop is actually your currency. And I think that the more you do that, the more you just blow up, because there isn't room for error at that point. Your margins get better. You start to see things in a bigger, brighter way. And you don't get this like everything starts to become more fluid, from the team culture all the way to the consumer's expectations, because it becomes one wide open, like transparent lens, as opposed to sort of opening and closing and being like, great, we have this one silo, then we're building this one for this silo, and then we're building this one for another. But yeah, it's just something that I think I would love that. I think we should ask of that,
Yeah.
for people to join in that, and or even do pop-ups and be able to sit there for a day. But I think that it's it's an exciting moment to be able to see how people interact with your product.
So I'm kind of thinking, okay, so phase one, the investment in, and what you kind of, I think you kind of rattled off. It's not like retail, but more just like in person. Like do something in
Yes.
person,
Yes.
physical, and it's really an
Yes.
investment in education, sharpening your axe, and understanding your customer, your messaging, and all that. So it's an investment in like building a better business. And then you were
Yes.
about, and I cut you off, and then you go to what's phase two?
Yeah, phase two, I would say the next bracket, which you're $100,000 annual brand, right? You're like, great, I'm doing 10K more a month. At that point, I would still maintain it to about 10, maybe you can get to 15% of your annual revenue and dedicate that to physical something. And I would say now you can enter in the state of maybe do a trade show. Now you're divvying up those dollars, and now you can say, great, I'm going to spend $10,000 on a mix between, I would do a trade show in a couple of different markets. And then you have the next bracket where now you're at that $1 million mark. Once you're in the $1 million mark, you can start to spend 20% of your annual revenue on retail, physical retail, to some extent. And I would say that this is at the point where when you're once at 1 million, hopefully you have a great, either you are great, you yourself is a great marketing team, but being able to dial into what are you measuring? And that's the biggest thing that I always say is like, you can go and dial up all these different channels, but if it isn't synchronized on what you're measuring, it's none of it matters.
Yeah, so on
Because
on that too, like I'm
yeah,
and
go
I'm
ahead.
I'm still not even, I'm not sold. Like the 15 to 20%, like what are you,
Yeah.
where are you getting that
Why
number?
10? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So I look at it as like, eh, no matter what along the way, you're gonna, if you're at like 5 million and you do a massive retail store, um, and maybe even bigger, maybe you're at some point, I think people at 10 million absolutely should do like, and we'll talk about what that budget should be. But the reason why I say test it is that eventually you're going to do it anyway. And those stopgaps of what happens when you open up your store would be learned along the way at a smaller amount. And the reason why is that that physical interaction is you saying, great, what am I learning from this person? And when you start to answer the question, ask the questions and answer it yourself, you start to actually create your entire brand guideline, all the stuff. I think that it's answered along the way as opposed to actually having from Google reviews to Yelp to everyone, your reviews answering it for you, if that makes sense. So once you do physical retail, you're actually just saying, great, I'm vulnerable. I'm asking, we want to learn. I'm vulnerable, asking, I want to learn. And once you do those things, when you open your physical store, you already know exactly what your big branded moment is. You know how to get people from the front of the store to the back of the store, which is really highly important. I think the biggest thing is when you open up a space, getting just the foot traffic. It's not about just dropping your store or your products into the highest foot traffic area. It's being able to build momentum enough where people not only know their brand, but everyone who doesn't know it wants to know it. And that feeling, you know, when brands enter into that state. And those ones have tested. I would say Warby Parker is a great one who went from great, they were DTC only. They very much created this feedback loop because that was what the brand was built on was great, try X amount of classes. I think it was 5 to start. And then they did the bus, and that bus tour that they did, and I think it was 2012, was so important to different colleges. They baked their price point based on learning about what the people were saying. And I think that that's a key thing too, is learning about your price point, learning what people are picking up, how many colorways, and then you have your physical space. And once you have that, they already knew that the pricing was going to range. And then being able to say, great, what other services would allow for it to be now fully formed where people are coming in for multiple reasons. And then you have people buying, upwards of 10 to a dozen glasses for no apparent reason. I mean, I specifically have that as well. Multiple glasses for no specific reason. But I think, yeah, I feel like there are so many brands that I could speak to who did it super well. And it was because they weren't afraid to actually test and learn from the start.
Yeah.
Um,
So let's stay in this bracket thing because this is pretty cool. So
yes,
I'm gonna try to keep echoing it back so maybe you can help me, but just so that we have
yes.
it and because we know nothing, so we'll say the stupid stuff. You correct us, Joy. The So like in that 10 million, let's say you're in that $10 million revenue per year bracket, and I still kind of am hearing like it's still about learning and committing to the channel.
Mm,
Because, and I love this because if you have the vision that you're going to be a big brand someday, and hopefully you do, because why are you doing it otherwise? I mean, I guess I take that back. Some people love to build a lifestyle brand. Good for them. The You want to learn it when the stakes are lower and not place because you're placing massive bets later and you don't want to
yes.
place massive bets on faulty information or hunches. You want to know. And so I love the bus idea. I'm actually not even familiar with the Warby Parker bus thing, but I love that. I could see a lot of brands that are in that $10 million bracket of like, hey, buy a used truck, wrap it, and go. If let's say you're an outdoor brand, go park it at the base of a mountain, in a
Yep.
mountain town, and go collect feedback. And the other thing that I'm thinking tactically, why this is really fun, is you could really play with your offer strategy in a very isolated moment versus like offer strategy is actually you think online, you think digital. Oh, it's so easy. You can spin up
Mm,
things no matter. Actually, it's way easier if you're selling out of the back of a truck to just be like, today we're gonna run a 2 for 1 and see how that does. Tomorrow we're
yes.
gonna run three
Yes.
for five. Like,
Yeah.
and you can just change it, or you can change it hour by hour. You can't do
Yes.
that digitally.
Yes.
Like,
That is what I'm saying is like some of my what I love is going to the markets, like the Renegades, or where you're seeing it all happen. And that's actually the feed of information. The people who are doing it great have some sort of sampling, and it doesn't matter if your product is not food, you're giving something to them, and you have a tiny little booth space. And I would say that when you see brands do it well, they're optimizing the environment and the experience for the consumer, even though it's the tiniest space. And that's why when I equate it to when you do it, everyone always looks at as cost, like it's so expensive. Well, you can actually amplify your experience at the lowest cost. And I can share with people how to do it again for $100 or $1,000. But of course, when you're at a 10 million, you've got, then again, if you follow the rule of it being, now you're probably at the 10 to 20%. So let's just say at the bare minimum, you're spending $1 million on physical retail. What can that get you? Oh my goodness. You can do a full on probably 1 year short term pop up. You can do a couple different activations. And I'm excluding sort of the out of home advertising, digital, and all of the other things that you would feed into this. But just for physical retail sake, you can definitely do. And I would do. I wouldn't. In your first year, I wouldn't actually sign the lease. I would do it where I would do between 5 to 10 different short term activations and do multi city and really learn your demographic. Do two, templatize it, and then get to that again 10% state. And that's when you actually learned exactly how to do your physical retail. That's from learning what kind of person you want to represent you. You want to learn again what kind of what are you doing in terms of sales tactics to get people to purchase X amount. I mean, it's just it's endless what you can learn. And to your point, CJ, it's exciting when people see that, oh wait, you can actually change up your messaging on the dial just by speaking to somebody, and it doesn't have to be baked in your marketing message. And then that's when it becomes it's speed of light of where you can go with all of that messaging.
So our agency has a client. The brand's called Haven Tents. Derek, the founder, was already on the podcast, and he tells the story. But he's founder-led brand.
Amazing.
They are killing it. They have this really incredible product where it's just this. It's a lay flat hammock, and it looks like magic when you see it. It just doesn't make sense to your brain. But he's a big proponent of trade shows, the outdoor trade shows. And here would be my add-on to this. When you do these in-person activations, get somebody to turn on a camera and record your damn
Yes.
pitch. So
Yes.
Derek does this all the
Yes.
time. He just always has somebody floating around him because he said the pitch about 1 billion times. They just record
Right.
it and they post these to the internet. And because he's got a little bit of an unfair advantage, his product looks like magic. But
Wow.
these go viral. One of these videos alone did 40 million views. He
Wow.
regularly, almost on a weekly basis, is posting videos like this: million views, million views, million views, no problem. And it's nothing
Wow.
special. It's just him pitching the product. And it
Yes.
casts this disproportionate shadow where it's like, what is this cool brand or whatever? And it's, it's so my advice to anybody investing in any in-person thing,
Yes.
turn on a camera, capture the
Yes.
content, and feed it back into digital.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
Joy, you talk about these stages of growth and building momentum from these trade shows up until having a very sustainable physical presence. But every brand is trying to do this. Every brand's trying to go and do trade shows, make their mark, and then get a physical, sustainable store. It's like, what sets some brands apart when it's such a competitive market? Like, what are some of the common pitfalls that you just see brands do time and time again?
Yes. Oof. Well, if you're not someone, if you consider yourself, I hate typecasting because I do think that people, may be an introvert, and it may be it's a great thing for specific product. But I would say when it comes to trade show or doing pop up, the learning or the key thing in that environment is to bring in somebody who is fully open. And the reason why is it is a vulnerable state, but you don't have to be the one to do it. I think the often this whole idea of like we as the founders have to do every single piece and part. I know for myself, CJ mentioned the, turn on a camera. I get strangely camera shy. But when it's somebody doing it and I'm just doing my thing and I could care less that there is a camera, but I am so hyper focused, that's when it shines. Because like you said to the founder who, said it over and over again, that's what we do. We share our expertise, not in the light, but when it's dark, when it's just like great, somebody's got to clean the floor and open for business. These are the moments where I think that actually why these things go viral is because it's the most vulnerable and intimate moment. You've got the founder cleaning a floor before doors open. This is often what ends up happening. And so it's the intimacy of that.
I would
But when
say
it comes
record
to a
that
trade,
too. Record that moment,
yes,
post it on social.
yes,
The
yes,
founder cleaning the
yes.
floor. Are you kidding? That would kill.
I'm like, yes, yes. And that's often what happens because they care the most. They care about the details. They care about the smell, the all the things. But I would say when it comes to a trade show, it's time suck. For sure it is. But you get the friend or the younger friend or someone who, again, online sees social media is amazing. You get the person and you're like, great, they've been feeding you. We love you, brand. We love your brand. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'd do anything. I want to do your socials and be like, well, you want to come to a pop-up booth and be my main person who now records everything, that's your person. And so I would say that oftentimes as a founder, you get into the space where you feel like you have to do everything. I've been there. I know that multiple brands have done that too. And, I say always look around and be like, who's the best suited? Who's the best fit for this particular piece? And when you start to piece those who are best suited to do it, oh, it's a night and day difference because they want to gather the information, they'll feed it back to you, and now you can create it as more these data points. When you're doing it and you have your back facing the human and you're kind of on the computer and people are coming up and your palms are sweaty and you don't want to speak to people, that's it. It's not as charming. And I would say that the biggest flop and what ends up happening is that brands don't see or when you go into the environment, you don't see again the vulnerability starts to happen even when it's wholesale. When you are again back facing in any such way, you're eating a big sandwich because you're at a trade show. These things, they're part of your brand aesthetic. And it's not saying that it's not also vulnerable as in like do your thing, eat the sandwich, but it's also, it's important to be able to show up with like this energy, like I care about people coming to see the product and the brand. And I do think the best way to really show up and actually do it well is like ensuring that you have the team to do it that does it.
It's so funny. This
And
reminds me of a
that
story.
changes the dynamic. Yeah, it changes the dynamic for
It,
sure.
it reminds me of a story, Joy. My mentor, this guy Russell Kern, he was also on the guest on the podcast. He's got 50 years of agency experience. He took me under his wing many years ago. He's agency founder and CEO, so he had no problem telling people what the constructive criticism that they needed to hear. And
Yes.
I used to be one of the new business people, and so I was, on the road tour on all these conferences that we had to go to. And I remember at one of them, I had a drink in my hand at the booth, because it was like cocktail hour, and Russell came over.
Right, right.
He goes, "We don't drink at the booth. Don't put that away. He's like, you're the face of the agency. You're the brand. Like, I know you want to have a good time. So I think it's more casual these days. This was, 15 years ago
Right.
or
It
whatever.
absolutely.
But
Yes.
he's like,
Yes.
you're working, and we're trying to present a look and feel and a professionalism. And then that
Yes.
later on evolved into one of our core values at the agency now is we say everything communicates. And it's stolen right from the hospitality industry, and it's what do the dirty windows in the
Yeah.
hotel lobby say about the cleanliness of the rooms?
Yes.
What is the clip of the founder scrubbing the little dirt out of the corner of the store say about the attention to detail of the products? And it's like it
Yes.
says everything. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. And that's why, when it comes to retail, the best thing is learn from hospitality and learn these details because it does add up. I mean, we say it's a common thing, not only in our household but for retail, is that we say know your impact. And your impact, it's like great, you can have your body and sort of your language be as such, but the impact will be quite big. And not knowing it, it says volumes on the way that we're speaking with, again, our physical, um and I think that that's the most important thing when it comes to physical retail is because people, they're reading it, they're reading oh, I cannot wait for us to do this ever on a walk because I can share and point out all the time in terms of what brands are doing well and which ones aren't, just purely based on, again, their staff. And when you walk in and you see, again, if it's happy, very friendly, very charismatic, very easygoing, sort of freedom, um, sort of free and excited individuals, you better bet that at the top there's someone saying, "Hey, we really believe in culture." Maybe the diversity thing is
Mhm.
still very much part of their brand moment. And you see it then seeped all the way down again to the physical retail team, because that's where it bleeds. That's where, again, it's so vulnerable that it can be the height of the heartbeat. It can be, again, everything that drives the momentum forward, but it could be also the fall. And that's where everyone sees it most. So, that it's always fun when people ask like, "Oh, what do you think? How do you think XYZ brand is doing?" And I'm like, "Great, let's go on a walk." And you will see for yourself which ones are doing well and the next ones that are perhaps, filing chapter 11, which is always sad for me, but
Yeah. You know what's
it
crazy?
does
It's
happen.
like it's kind of like you can do a lot of things right, and I want to go and put a like a period on this simple thing, maybe simpler said than done. It's like getting the right people interfacing with the people walking up to the counter or into the store. I think, Joy, we might have talked about this last time we met, of just like if you go into a bar or restaurant and your whole experience hinges on the, charisma of your server or your bartender. And it's
Yes.
like you could do a lot, in my opinion, and I know nothing about retail, but you could do a lot of things wrong in your store or your retail experience. But if you have a charismatic, passionate, enthusiastic individual behind the counter, you can close sales and you'll learn a lot, and people will fall
Oh
in
yeah.
love with your brand.
Yes. And
And
that's
it,
why it's like you can have an incredible product, but it may not move if someone who's kind of just like had a big night and they're just like, "Oh, bored."
yeah, I mean, let's
That
let's let's
that
give
line, the
let's give some
opportunity.
credit to.
Yeah.
I'll give an example. We have a local. I won't drop their name. We have a local coffee shop right around the corner from us. It's so
Yes.
convenient.
Yes.
They have great food, good coffee, all that. We still go there all the time just out of convenience. But man, could those employees not want to be there anymore? I don't know. Like it is such a it's like an energy like vampire
Yes.
like center. And then you go to Starbucks and it's like you, for the most part, not always, right? But for the most part, that culture comes from the top down and they're doing
Yes.
something in their training where you
Yes.
have they're meeting a certain level of expectation of friendliness, and just even saying hello when you walk in the door
Yes.
is
Yes.
incredible. It's like, yeah, Starbucks beats this local place. Like, I
Yes.
hate to say
Yes.
it.
I mean, it's raining, and I would say, perhaps even the stability of that happens. I think that, we're seeing it all around us right now. What is happening with the instability of people's work, their ability to pay the bills, and I think that what ends up happening is that physical retail, it used to be something that people were like, great, I'm going to go into the hospitality space or retail. Now, people's main jobs are something digital. And they sort of have these side, like, I guess I have to be a barista or I have to be. And, some people do that for barista for a living for sure and do retail for a living as well. But I would say that I hope that people find a different synergy and alignment of why they do something in general, because it is so important to me. Like my favorite is when you see somebody again doing a mundane thing, whether it's like putting stickers on an orange, and you
Preach.
see them, but they could be the happiest person, and they're saying good morning, good evening, and that to me is like, suddenly, I don't know why, but I just pick up, like 12 oranges and I walk away there is no exchange. They don't even like say anything more than just a good morning, but it's a feeling. And I think that people have to remember, when you're in that position, you're selling a feeling.
Yeah.
And the feeling far extends when you have also the physical product also be something that somebody wants.
It
So
sounds
there's just
woo
some
woo. It's
here.
definitely not.
Yeah.
I mean, there's old school sales advice where if you're doing, cold calling, they tell you to smile when you're talking because people can hear your smile.
Oh
Um,
yeah. And stand up. Yes.
yes, and stand up, which I need to start doing when recording this podcast. But
I
the
know. Me too. Me too. No, no. I have an Aura ring. And it always alerts me. It's like you've been sitting for a while now,
yeah.
Joy. Let's get you up. So
So
I know
Joy, can
exactly
we
what you
can we
mean.
go back to, and I want to be respectful of your time, but the like go back
Yeah, I
to
have
just
a couple minutes over, so we can dive into any specifics as well.
you are the best. The just going back to like we work with a lot of clients that are in this like 20 to 50 million dollar a year range where they are kind of like at that moment like all right, you're starting to the scale and the crazy scale and rapid growth that online isn't as much anymore, or is more difficult, becomes more difficult, so you're starting to look for other channels. They're starting to look, how do we expand into retail? Like I still am like, help me convince them. I'm going to go back to almost asking the same question. Like, help me convince them, like, all right, guys, make this big investment. Here's how you should do it. Like, I know it's such
I
a,
break
it
it off as
depends.
and I'll share this based on again how I utilize more of this. It's a no-brainer when you just carve off a percentage. So look at it as just pure math. The amount that they're plateauing, let's just say for a year, whatever that plateau, or let's even take it quarter by quarter, 3 months, just take whatever they were about to spend and say, great, let's use that as a testing ground. So let's say, and I always say you can pull 5-10% of whatever your marketing budget is. Let's have that as a test because you can first create it as a channel test and then it becomes its own channel. But when you do it as more of an activation, it's easier to swallow that cost because marketing, when you're saying, great, I just spent $40,000 on a flat out of home, we still don't know the specific measurements. We know impressions, but we don't know specifically whether that market lift really, really worked. Dial that down, maybe like, let's not do again, out of home, I think still works to some extent. But if you want to really, really know your engagement, divvy it up and do some physical retail because that is going to always lead. It's still again the highest performing conversion channel, than any other channel. So like it's bound
And
to
do you
win. You got to
see
have the right thing to
do
do it
you
right.
see
Well,
like a positive, is it a positive ROI at that stage, or is it definitely like an investment into like brand building and things like that where you kind of have to get fuzzy with the math, or is it can you be positive ROI? And again, I know it depends on what you sell perhaps, but
yes, yes. Yeah, there's a little bit of price point, but I always bake it then. Let's just say that you're like, great, now we've convinced them to use about 10% of their full marketing dollars. That was going to be like, now you're just doing a fraction of what I shared as like starting with 10%. Now you're like 2, 3%. Okay. Um, Even that, yes, it is just based on it being, you want to do a like a pop-up, let's say. I would do maybe if you're pushing for sales, minimum 6 weeks, that drives again the consumer to come back and actually purchase. It's more stylistic. It's kind of like, again, as Zoe, I'm going to share back the dating thing is like everyone thinks that there's this like template doing retail. It's really just based on your goal. And so just like some people when they're dating, some want to, go into the full like, great, I want to start a family and do this route. Some want to spend their entire life again traveling to multiple places with this person. That's going to be the same thing as your physical retail if you think about it. If you are, that you're like, I want to be on high street in a major city, great. You're gunning for like, great, how do I ensure that my contribution margins are good? You're spending no more than 18% on your lease or your whatever you're negotiating. Like these are all key things that I can again share back with the listeners on exactly what you should be looking out for. And then you can mark it and say, great, Joy, I need someone to help me negotiate this. I will be on that call with you and that landlord or whomever it is, because I do believe that again, the multiplier creates what can break down what is this myth of great, you can keep raising the rents, keep raising the rents. And so there are abilities to do that. I think So when you were mentioning what is some of the pitfalls, I think I often see this as paying too high of rent for a long-term lease. But there's also ways around that too, is that you can actually create what would be four-wall profitability by sharing on the space and doing partnerships, and then, calling us up too and saying, great, Joy, I spent too much on my physical lease. What should I do? It's not fitting with the contribution margins that you mentioned. Great, you can do a shop share or do a pop-up with a really fun non-alcoholic beverage, or like, do like a day spa thing with, and bring in like a cool, if it's more of a wellness brand. So there's just a multitude of ways to actually get to your physical space working for you than against you. It's the one, wanting to do it, two, getting the right team around you, and everything starts to fall in place. Those metrics will be key of what you're measuring, both on the digital and physical side.
Talking just about having the
Got
right
it.
team around you. So say you have a creative agency at your disposal, what would you do? How would you use them? And just like be able to, like, if we were the performance enhancing drug in this situation, what would you get us doing?
Yes. Yes. Well, I love, that it is that beautiful pairing of saying, great, the willingness and desire for the digital team to say, great, what are we proposing on the retail side? And so getting the same ask, I'm sure you guys do it on the digital side, of like, what are our goals? So just paring down to what are our goals. Most everyone says, great, we want to drive sales, but then you go into, what does that mean? If you want to drive sales, a pop-up has to be no less than 6 weeks, because the rhythm of a consumer, they come back, they'll revisit, even if it's somebody who is visiting as a tourist. They kind of go into this loop where they're like, remember that trip? And they look at their photos and images and like, oh my God, remember that store? And then they go back online. You see again that lift happen. But that's really, really a key piece, because I think sometimes pop-ups exist too short and they expect magic to happen without actually existing in the space. If you're doing more of a great, we are doing sell through and wanting to push product, then yeah, a weekend pop-up works, but make sure that the visibility is there and you're sort of pairing it with either great opportunities, some great branded moments, some great branded experiences, something that allows for people to come away with it and be, again, saying, whoa, that was awesome. Or I didn't know of that brand and now I love it. And that just starts to blow up.
Can you give an
So it's like,
example of like a branded moment, branded experience for clarity?
yeah, yeah, I would say I've done so many different styles. I would say that the best ones would be uh, like a branded moment would be when you do a 4-day activation, and maybe you do a 4-day activation and you are a health and wellness brand, but you do it and you pair it at, let's say, another wellness brand, whether it be like a berries or something like that. And it's super important for there to be brand alignment, and that again, if you were like, great, I don't want to do physical retail, you can do it based on, again, activation partnerships. Those are like the key moments where I consider that also physical retail, but smarter. And that's kind of the specific era we're in, where it's like more of this partnership play where you have something already existing. So, for example, um, we've done ones at Citizen M, for example, in New York City, where we have tons of brands who always do fun things over at Citizen M. And what you see is that it's baked into the people who are going there. They're traveling there, and just like the wonderment of a traveler is so much in this, like, I don't like, when we all know it, anyone who has traveled knows this, is that you don't know why, but you pick up things and suddenly your wallet comes out and you're just purchasing it at the same moment. You
No
don't need
vacation.
it. You don't need another hat, right? Like, how many hats do I have from places that I visited to, just because it was a fun, cool color? And it
It's
just
the
reminded
same part of the
me. So
brain that I pack like 2 books where I'm like, I've never read a book in my life. I'm like, oh, now I'm a reader.
yes, yes,
Like,
yes, yes, because you're like, well, in case, because it might get me there. Yes.
yeah.
But I do think what I like to expand my knowledge on is not about doing physical retail and getting the right demographic in the right space, yes, a lot of the operating pieces must be there, but it's about being at the right place at the right time and actually showing up where your audience already is. And so it's about ensuring that, again, your product kind of fits with that discoverable moment because most people, without a doubt, it's like we aren't thinking, oh, wait, I need a hat today. We're just for every hat moment I've ever had, it's been like it's just something that I saw, and it was not even a hat shop. It was always a coffee shop. It was always, at an airport, something random.
Yeah.
And those are the moments where I think pairing the right moment your product should exist and actually be um, tried on. So, for example, you mentioned the brand that you worked with earlier. Like, how cool would it be to actually see it be, it be unfolded and like in the moment that you want to actually take it out. And those are the moments where I think that it's like it's about alignment. So some of the traditional ways of doing pop-ups or long-term leases, yeah, we can get into the when and the why, but I think that being able to align with moments in which your product just is very fitting and people want to be in an adventurous moment, that brain doesn't turn off. Then suddenly they're just picking and choosing all the things that they want. So there is something to be said on why the physical still works.
Love it. Joy.
Yeah.
It's been a joy. How many people have said that to you, Kara?
Thank you. Thank you. No, I always appreciate it because sometimes you get into moments where like, yeah, you know what? You're right.
It's been
Is
awesome.
there
So,
anything else I can answer? I can
I
speak
mean,
about this, you guys. Joke for hours.
there's a
And I always feel
million
like I want to
things.
get very tactical because it feels again like a black box. So anytime I can share on percentage breakdowns, on budgeting, on what you should be looking at in terms of leases per zip code, these things are all, it's just like that's information that I think that should be consistently shared with the public. And it's too bad it's not as transparent as it should be. So eventually we'll see the next layer of this, and
Yeah.
hopefully in a few years we're going to be speaking about how it was so funny that real estate was not transparent before and now it is.
Yeah. I think my big takeaway just from our conversations, like this is just the tip of the iceberg, but it's like, try to bake it into your business plan very early in the trajectory of the business. Because if you're planning on being growing to be a big brand, like it's gonna be a factor at some point, and you want to do it when it's least risky, and then have it just baked into your model, and then use that as an education engine to influence your messaging and your brand and your targeting and your offer strategy. um, and get some key fundamental things right, like make sure that you're casting correctly especially at the beginning, and having being very mindful of who is going to be the face of your brand. I'll build on one thing because we see this in the influencer marketing space, right? I think one of the most common pitfalls we see in digital marketing is brands go out and they just get professional influencers to be shills for their products, and these people are just like predictable, like all right, look at this, here it is. And it's like you could tell they know nothing. And our advice is
Yeah,
always
I
like,
would I would say that, yeah, that's still very much, I consider that like mid-market learnings where
yeah,
even still the truest is it's like the CS. Let's say you're kind of mashing up between your top salesperson, your top CS person. That's what it should feel like in harmony
yeah,
when you do physical retail. Because that harmony between what people are hearing as what's wrong versus what you're selling, when you're syncing that up, and I don't, it's goes the same if you have a physical product, if you have a service, you have anything, those two things should always be, again, shared at the top, because when that is the key learning, that's when you're building a billion-dollar business, because, that's what people want is constant, again, learning, and you're building the evolution of what can be. So again, hopefully listeners are hearing that. It's like, great, if I want to build a brand someday, I'm doing it from being able to say, great, do I want to be vulnerable enough
yeah,
to actually care what people want?
yeah.
And that's why physical retail will work when it comes to asking the right questions.
Yeah, I think just to tie a bow on it, it's like a lot of stuff in business, right? You just have to do it. Just execute,
Yes.
and
Yes.
try to mitigate risk as much as you can. And, if that means buying, or, heck, go buy a cart, like, just get there in front of people, and just start there, but just start and do something,
Yes.
would be
Yes.
my takeaway. And then my other takeaway is, like, yeah, it does sound like it can get pretty complicated, or there's a lot of common mistakes made. So I would just say, call Joy, call you. Like, or go to retail, or
It's actually, yes, it's yeah, and I will always receive and share at least the tips. But I would say it starts to become really fun. I would love for any founders who are curious enough to be able to say, great, like, join me in on just once you do it and you open your eyes to the potential of a channel being the one that, again, allows you to just float on top of the world. Yeah, it doesn't have to be your world to be able to do it successfully. And I think that that's the common mistake, is that people feel like they have to know retail. We are all part of retail. It's taking the key learnings based on your own living experience. Great. Do you want things to be more accessible? Then do the things that are, more pop-up friendly or access friendly, or more based on distribution or wholesale. Like, I think taking your own learnings and things that you want for yourself is always a great way to actually put your strategy and plan together. So that's my shortcut way of saying, great, either call us, or when you come up with a plan and it doesn't work out, call us too.
yeah, love it. Let's end there. Let's roll the credits.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.